I'm super happy to do this. This is the first ecosystem discussion, and we hope that this is a starting point for many to follow. Sweden and Germany have an innovation partnership agreement that we signed a couple of years ago, which has led to a lot of different initiatives and collaborations between the countries. But we also learned during the way, during these collaborations, that we also have a lot to learn from each other and how we are organizing the ecosystem, how we're supporting our startups, how we're supporting our scale-ups. So this session will be all about deep diving into the Swedish and the German innovation ecosystem. And I'm super, super happy that I have two fantastic speakers with me here and real experts on each country's innovation system and startup support. And first, I would like to welcome Philipp Kövener. Thank you for covering for your colleague on a quite short notice. That was really great. We have this corona situation all over the world, so it's quite, yeah, we can really tell also by the number of speakers we have during these days that we have been forced to do a lot of last minute changes, but that also indicates that people really are, helping each other out. And also, of course, that it's a very serious situation that we are in. So we are very happy to be able to gather this way anyway, despite the situation, even if it's online and not that vivid as we are used to. So Philipp, please introduce yourself.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Stina. Hi, everybody. I'm Philipp from Germany Trade and Invest. I think I will have the first presentation today, introducing a little how we support international startups entering the German market and also German startups, let's say, entering other markets. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And I think it's a great opportunity.
Very good. I'm very happy to have you here. And then we have Lena Miranda, who is CEO of Linköping Science Park and also the chair of Swedish Incubators and Science Parks, which is my home organization. So you are actually my boss.
Okay, yeah, happy to be here as well. And so important that we get the chance to do international benchmark. And I hope that we could strengthen cooperation on a European level. So very happy to be here.
Great. And then we have my dear colleague, Mikaela Hellberg, who will be looking at taking questions in the chat. So please do not hesitate. We really want this to be a good session with a lot of interactivity. We're not that many people, so please really dig into and join the discussion after the presentations. So Mikaela, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Mikaela, and I'm a colleague to Stina at Swedish Incubators and Science Parks. So Lena is also my boss. As Stina said, please let us know your comments and questions for the speakers here in the chat function on your right side. Please use the session and not the event, so there we could follow your thoughts and reflections. Thank you.
Yeah, super great. And I know that we also have a lot of different countries joining this session, which is a great thing. And that's really what we want to achieve. We want to build bridges, not only between Sweden and Germany, of course, but also between all of the countries participating. So please, really, I really encourage you to ask your questions and make yourself heard. And then we can continue this discussion, hopefully even after this session. First of all, then I would like to hand over the screen to Philipp, who will do a short presentation about Germany.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Philipp. I'm maximizing your picture. I hope that, yeah, good.
So let's see if it works as it is supposed to.
Yes.
So just a quick question. You do see my screen now as it should be, right? Okay,
looks
thank you very much.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Philipp. I work for Germany Trade and Invest. which belongs to the German Ministry of Economics. And I will take about 15 minutes to show you a little how we support startups in Germany, financially, but also in terms of organization. And also I will have a brief, some slides on how things changed during the pandemic. Yeah, and I hope I won't bore you too much. So let's jump right into it. Maybe a few numbers, a few facts to start with about the German startup ecosystem. This is Germany, as you can see. We have currently roughly 70,000 startups. So you see that over the past few years, there has been a constant rise. Between 2018 and 19 has been a rather stable development, let's say. And yeah, it's 70,000. And the industries are as follows. So the main industry is ICT, not very surprisingly, followed by consumer goods, health, and automotive. As I will show you a bit later, the German industry is very diverse, and so are, of course, the startups. Unfortunately, I should say, only 1 out of 5 founders is female, 4 are male, therefore. And of course, we hope that this will change a bit in the future. So this is just a few numbers to start with. As we would like to speak about innovation, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the German economy. German economy, of course, is very known for their cars, but we believe actually for key principles in terms of startups. So we believe that startups are one of the main drivers of the structural change that every economy, and of course the German as well, is going through. Digitization will change the whole system, and startups are a great driver, and we want to support this. Why is this? I mean, this is not a secret. Startups have new innovative ideas, they create jobs, they think differently, and they help established companies to solve their problems. I'm very curious to see how the situation is in Sweden, but in Germany we have a bit unfortunate situation that there's a bit of an inhibition, a threshold when it comes to collaborating with startups, which means that the industry is still a bit reluctant to work with startups. To enable this, the Federal Ministry of Economics, of course, to promote collaboration between startups and established companies. A quick question before I go to my next slide. Do you see everything okay? Do you hear me well? Stina, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you. I was just doing some tech things with your movie on the back end.
Okay.
So
I just want to check very quickly if everything works and if I'm not talking to an empty room here. Okay.
We have 25 people watching at the moment, which is great.
Oh, great. Then let's say adding to what I just introduced, I would like to show you the Digital Hub initiative, starting with a map. This is again Germany, and I mentioned earlier that the German industry is very diverse. So in the south, you have the manufacturing industry, big car companies. In the center, in Frankfurt, you have the financial industry. In the north, you have logistics. And we set up 12 hubs to reflect this diverse structure of the German economy. A hub in this case is a physical location, can be an office space, for instance, where there are startups and established companies of one industry sitting together and working on the issues of that industry. For instance, Frankfurt, as I mentioned, is the banking capital of Germany. Here are fintech startups and banks working on payment solutions, for instance. In Hamburg, where there is the big harbor and logistics, here are logistics startups and shipping companies sitting also together, working on these problems. And the idea is that startups have new ideas, new technologies, and the established industry has jobs to offer, basically, and a need to fulfill. Maybe some words about the organizational setup. I promise I won't bore you too much with this. As the infrastructure in Germany and the industries are very diverse, so are the needs. I would like to give you 3 examples. For instance, Frankfurt and Darmstadt, as I mentioned, banking is basically run by the Hessian Development Bank and the University of Frankfurt and the University of Darmstadt. If you look at Dresden, Leipzig, where we have the Smart Systems Hub, this is run by T-Systems, SAP, and the City of Leipzig. And third, Stuttgart manufacturing industry is run by GFT Technologies, an IT company, the University of Stuttgart, and Fraunhofer Institute, which is a public research institute. So you see that the organizational setup of each hub differs depending on the needs of the local infrastructure, depending on the needs of the local companies. And we feel that this decentral approach is very helpful to the different hubs. Something, let's say, on the meta level, the whole thing is, of course, sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. They are the umbrella. We, as Germany Trade and Invest, do international promotion, which means we develop digital communication campaigns, we do international networking and ecosystem development, and we help gain international attention and basically help startups in the hubs go international and talk about the hubs international, so that, let's say, startups from abroad are interested in the hubs as well. Third, there is, let's say, the national coordination done by RCKT, belonging to Rocket Internet, which do marketing and communication, also networking and ecosystem development, and they enable all kinds of innovation. So it's kind of a triangle. The sponsor is the ministry, we do the international part, and RCKT does the national part. Our target groups are threefold. First, not very surprising, I should say, startups. We would like to reach as many international startups as possible, which is why we go to international events such as today and talk about how amazing the initiative is. Second, of course, investors. A huge share of my work is to speak to investors and to get their attention, because, as everybody knows, startups are in constant need of funding. Well, they basically need money. And I would like to speak to, I do speak to investors very much to encourage them, get to know the Hub initiative and get to know the startups. And third, established businesses. As I hope I made clear earlier, we would like to establish as many cooperations as possible between our startups and established businesses to solve business needs and well, to help the German economy transform, and of course to help the startups get jobs, basically. Maybe a few words about financing and incentives. Just very quickly, three ways, basically. There is a financing mechanism called Invest 2.0, which helps mobilizing business angel investments, which means if there's somebody wanting to invest VC money in startups, there is support for that. Second, there is grants. Germany offers grants up to 40% to the, let's say, to new production or service facilities. As you can see here on that incredibly tiny map, basically, the more east you establish a new company in Germany, the more funding you get. Third, equity capital, KfW, which stands for Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, makes basically public sources available for young enterprises at various stages. Yeah, I won't bore you too much, but the basic takeaway is there's, of course, money and funding available, which we would like to share with new startups as well. So, as I mentioned, I will now tell you a little how we do things differently in Corona times, because, as said, usually we would go to big tech fairs all around the world and tell everybody who wants to hear it or who doesn't want to hear it how great the initiative is, and I would, of course, take our startups, go there and do some network in Asia or wherever. Since this is not possible anymore, we had to think of new ways. And one of these ways is developing our own formats. So in the past, we would, for instance, organize VC receptions with international investors. This is, I think, in the embassy in France, in the German embassy in France, in Paris, where we would just invite venture capital companies and our startups and have them mingle and do some networking. Since this is not possible anymore, we had to think of a new format. And this is basically an online pitch event. So we, basically a series of online pitch events where we selected startups and had them pitch in front of an international jury. And of course, a huge audience. I have a small film, a very short film. It shouldn't take longer than a minute. Stina,
yes.
Would you show the movie?
The tech issues is not ending here, if you were hoping for that. So I would kindly like to ask you to use the YouTube button on the screen beside of the presentation button, the small play icon. And then if you can just paste your YouTube link there and press play, then we will see it in the best possible way.
Okay, let's try that.
And I know also that there was a duplicate of the sessions, hence we have many new listeners from the last few minutes, which is super great. So we will do a recap quite soon, so you don't feel that you miss out anything.
Oh.
We had a duplicate session because of tech issues this morning. So we've been kind of sweating. I hope that's okay with you.
It says I can't share it because it has to be a YouTube link. We could either take the video that I embedded in the...
then we take the video that you embedded.
Right, then I will just show the video. I hope everybody will be able to see it. It might be a bit... I hope it goes very well. Let's say it like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I tone down my volume a bit because it's quite loud. As said, it's an online pitching event, a series of online pitching events which we developed, and I will now show you a very short video about
it. Philip, sorry, we're not seeing you have stopped sharing your screen. You need to share your screen again. Yeah. Well, it was a nice song.
It is a nice song, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, let's give it another go.
So sorry. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect.
Do you see it now?
Yes.
Great.
Good.
All right, this was our little propaganda video. I will now continue sharing my screen. Sorry.
Yeah, now we are actually almost 50 people in the session, which is super great. So when Philip,
yes.
Since we have a lot of new visitors in the session because of the duplicate sessions, I would, if it would be okay for you, if you could just do a short recap from the beginning of your presentation and explain who you are, just to frame.
Shall I use the slides or just tell everybody what it is?
Please, if you can just go back to the first slides, just to give the context of who you are and what context you are talking about, so it's easier for the audience to...
Hey everybody, thanks for joining in. So for those who did come a bit later, my name is Philipp. I work for Germany Trade and Invest, and my job is to promote an initiative run by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs. I won't go through every slide, but maybe in a few words. We set up 12 hubs all across Germany, which means physical locations where there are established companies and startups working in their specific field of industry. For instance, in Frankfurt, which is the banking capital, there are fintech startups and banks working on payment solutions. For instance, in Dortmund and Hamburg, where there is a lot of logistics, there are companies physically sitting together working on logistics. And the overall idea is to, well, basically make the German economy fit for the future. I will jump over these slides. The whole initiative is umbrellaed by the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. And our target groups are startups, investors, and businesses. And I think now I should just continue with my normal slide. I was just about to say that since in pandemic times, we can't do a lot of our usual tasks anymore. We can't go around the world and tell everybody about the initiative. We can't, let's say, have that kind of person-to-person publicity. We had to develop our own formats. And I did just introduce the series of online pitching events, which gave the startups in the hub access to international VC investors. Another thing that we do, we in the past would, of course, book stands at international tech fairs and festivals. Since this also is not possible anymore, we develop bespoke virtual events for selected industries. For instance, various EU roundtables, or just the other week, we had an event called German-Swedish Health Tech, which was a mixture of, let's say, panel discussions and pitching events where we, let's say, shed a light on health technologies from Germany and Sweden. Third, we of course participate in online events. So instead of booking stage presences at international tech fairs and festivals, which we did in the past, we now of course give our startups the opportunity to have a virtual stage presence in conferences such as Collision from Home or Web Summit and all the other let's say big events. So now maybe a few numbers to conclude with. So since we started, we now have 500 startups within the network, about 1,500 corporates and SMEs. Since 2017, about €1 billion of venture capital has been invested in the startups within the networks. We had 500 successful corporations, which means startups getting jobs, getting orders from the corporates in the network and solving their issues. We had about 1,000 networking events and 250-ish international corporations and programs. And that basically concludes my presentation. I would like to thank you very much. And I think now it's time to hand over back to Stina, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. And I'm grateful for you being so humble despite all these tech issues. I know for sure that would have been very stressed as a speaker to experience this. So I'm very, very grateful for your patience and still keeping up the mood and the energy. Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
And then I would like to warmly welcome Lena Miranda. There's a lot of new people in the audience. And I would like to introduce you again as a CEO of Linköping Science Park, one of Sweden's greatest science parks when it comes to ICT. And of course, also chair of Swedish Incubators and Science Parks. That is the home organization of Ignite Sweden. So you are actually my boss. And I'm very happy for that. So please, Lena Miranda, the stage is yours. And I will share your presentation for you. And we can't hear you. Can you say something?
Now, maybe you can hear me. Okay, wonderful. Sorry about that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very good. And I have some people are complaining about the sound. And yes, we're not in the studio environment, so we are from home, and that might, implicate. I'm not at home actually. I'm at my office, but most of us are actually from home, so that might also not give you the clear sound as you will have this afternoon when we will be physically in the studio, many of us. So I'm sorry for that as well. Anyway, I'm picking up your presentation. I'm soon going to press the share screen button.
So I could start by saying thank you, Philip, for a very inspiring presentation. And I see we have some things in common, and some things might be a bit different when it comes to Sweden and Germany. I would like to try to present kind of the, I don't know, secret sauce of Sweden as an innovation nation. And then I will also take you through the different actors in our innovation ecosystem on a national and regional basis. So this is a map. It's a SISP map, the Swedish Incubators and Science Parks. And you can see the different hubs across our country. And we have in total about 40 incubators and 30 science parks, being kind of the infrastructure or backbone for different innovation initiatives around the country. So next slide, please.
I need to ask you, is this working? Because I lost you, right?
I see the slides. I see them. So I see, yeah.
And you see them in full screen?
Yes.
Okay, good, because then I can't see you either, the chat, so just so you know, so just tell me when you want me to change and I will change.
So I will try to, with a few bullets, describe the characteristics that lies behind Sweden becoming this innovation nation. So we can take the next slide. Thank you. And the next. The next, there we are. Yes. So we could begin by talking a little bit about the public-private partnership in Sweden that have served Sweden very well for many decades. And the public sector investing heavily in the private sector, actually being both a investor, but also a very demanding customer, and paving the way for companies like, for instance, Ericsson to make it global. So Ericsson was working a lot with the Swedish Televerket at that time, Telia today. We also have ABB that worked closely with Vattenfall, and also, of course, Saab working together with the Swedish Defense Agency. And this close partnership between the public and the private sector have been quite a success for Sweden. We are also known to be a knowledge nation, and our government have invested heavily in academic institutions beginning in the 60s and 70s. No, of course, earlier than that, but expanding in the 60s and 70s, and then in the 90s, which have led up to Sweden today having a very well-educated and skilled workforce overall. There is also a lot to be said about the culture that is driving innovation. And Sweden is a nation that haven't been to war for more than 200 years, which we always talk about, because this have fostered us to be a very trusting nation. We have trust for one another. We have trust for our politicians, our institutions, and our companies. So the trust also helps us to collaborate. And from early years in school, we learn to collaborate in groups, not popular among all, but that's what we do. We work in groups, and we learn to acknowledge each other's capabilities and knowledge and listen to one another. And we are also very famous to be a very consensus-driven country that likes to take decisions together, not be managed in a greater essence. So very collaborative and co-creative. And I would also say that solidarity have been one of the Swedish values that also help build the Swedish welfare system, where we have a lot of great support in childcare, elderly care, healthcare, and also the social security system that brings a lot of feeling of security and safety among the Swedish people, which I also believe helps us becoming entrepreneurs and actually dare to try out our ideas and becoming innovations. This culture of being open, collaborative, and trusting also paved the way for the Swedish model that we call triple helix. It's a model where the academia, the business, and the public sector work very closely across intersections. And this collaboration have also led up to different innovations during the past decades. Another thing that is quite unique for Sweden is the very high level of digitalization. And in the early 90s, we had something called the PC reform, which meant that a lot of Swedes got a PC of their own at home and started elaborating with that. And in the late 90s, our prime minister said that we should have broadband for all, which was the start of a very great expansion of our digital infrastructure. And today we have a very well connected broadband in our cities, maybe not as much in the countryside, but working on it. And there's still a lot of things to do when it comes to digital infrastructure, of course. But the high level of digitization among the Swedish people also make us very technology friendly and early adopters to new digital solutions, which also have been fostering the entrepreneurial culture and the innovation nation. A lot of people around the world know us as the startup nation. We have great digital entrepreneurs and brands like Spotify, Skype, Mojang, Klarna, and actually we have the greatest number of unicorns worldwide if you look per capita of our country. And it's really easy to both start and run a business in Sweden. So there's a lot that is being done to also gather the startup community, and not least the Ignite initiative that Stina and her colleagues run is a great initiative to also connect the startups to the corporates. I would also like to mention the hard and soft management that maybe makes us also a bit different from other countries. But we've been talking about research and education. We have business development programs, funding programs, but we also put a lot of attention to the soft management, the community building, the inspiring of individuals from early ages, the fostering of the inclusive culture and the paid forward culture, so that we are a small nation, but we are very well connected in Sweden and abroad. So the last bullet, and I've been talking about the Swedish model called triple helix, the open, collaborative, and trusting culture, leading up to us being very collaborative and sharing information across sectors. And this also, of course, makes us very good at and interested in open innovation and in the future, hopefully transformation. So from the triple helix perspective, today we talk a little bit about multi-helix because the challenges we are facing are so great that not one individual can solve them, not even a company or a country can solve them by themselves, but we need to work together, and we need a lot of different perspectives and disciplines to work over the borders. And our Director General of the Innovation Agency, Vinnova, Darja Isaksson, she says, invest together and share with all. And I think that is a good vision for the future, because we have to promote collaboration in our nations and internationally, not least in Europe. And we need to promote a change culture, we need to promote new business models, and we need to find new ways of working together and more agile. So that's a little bit about Sweden, the innovation nation. And let me just also present some of the important decisions and actors in the Swedish innovation landscape. So of course, you see Swedish incubators and science parks in the middle of this map because we made the map. But I will also present to you the other different actors that are really important to our landscape. So I can take the next picture. Thank you. No.
Do you see the next picture now?
No. We try again.
Yeah.
Did it stop?
Maybe do like this.
Okay.
Maybe the computer is
No,
tired.
it's still the
Do you
same.
see it now?
So otherwise, I will just talk you through them. That's okay.
No. But it's a very nice looking picture. We should we have it. I'm resharing the screen. Maybe it was because we were on the same picture for so long time.
No.
How about now?
So let me just go on. It's okay. Still.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about now then?
Okay.
You see it
If
here?
you go down one picture, maybe. No, still the same. There we go. There, it was there. Next slide.
It's just super slow. But what you see is like 5-10 seconds delay.
I'll just go through them talking.
Yeah, and then hopefully the image will be shown very, very soon.
So, of course, the political system lays the foundation for us operating to support innovation and growth. And industrial policy is characterized by modern liberalism, regardless to government. And the job creation have been very high on the political agenda for the last decades. And for us as actors in the regional and local innovation ecosystems, it's really important that the local political is anchored with the national initiatives. And so there have been some political reports and decisions during the last decades that have been very meaningful to us. One of them was the entrepreneurial report that was presented like 10 years ago. And it stated the importance of innovation support system and campus-based innovation hubs. We have also had a few research and innovation propositions that have been handled by the parliament and government. And they have, for example, stated the decision about innovation centers close to the universities, and also stated the 17 strategic innovation programs that is run today in Sweden. And the research and innovation propositions have had a lot of emphasis on research, not as much on innovation. And Sweden is also known not to have the best ROI of its research investments. So we should, in my opinion, put more focus on innovation in the future. Sweden have 3 national subsidiaries to our government through the Business and Trade Ministry. And the first one is ALMI, that have been operating since the mid-90s. And their assignment is to support growing companies with business counseling and funding programs. We also have RISE, which is quite a new organization that is the result of putting together different independent research institutes in Sweden to one united RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden. And they are state-owned, and they are focusing on supporting companies, mostly SMEs, with applied science, innovation, and they also run a number of test beds. And they have the assignment to help us get internationally competitive, but also strengthen the innovation inside the Swedish businesses. And then we have Business Sweden, that is the former Trade Council and Invest in Sweden agencies that have united in one organization. So we have export and invest in one and the same. And I think this is quite close to what you presented, Philipp, earlier. And Business Sweden have their offices around the world. They also operate nationally in building business nodes on a regional level. And then we have the two national agencies that are really important to the innovation landscape, and that is Vinnova, the innovation agency, and Tillväxtverket, which is the Swedish Agency for Economic and Regional Growth. And they fund different projects and programs, and they also, Vinnova initiated the National Incubator Program in the early 20th century, and also the Winvext Cluster Program, which I think inspired the European Union to initiate the Smart Specialization Program. And within Tillväxtverket, we run the S3 pilot, which gathers all the regional smart specialization organizations and clusters. So those are really important. And finally, a few words about our member organization, the Swedish Incubators and Science Parks. And we are operating all across Sweden, 40 incubators and 30 science parks. And the network includes about 5,000 innovative growth and knowledge-intense companies with around 90,000 employees. And actually, 80% of all job creation in Sweden today is being made within SMEs. So this is a really, really important group of companies that we are trying to support. We are also connected to the International Association of Science Park and Areas of Innovation on a global basis, and mostly maybe on a European level. And this landscape, I would say, internationally is emerging. Like science parks were founded in the 80s in Europe, and the incubators in the 90s and 20th century. And then we have had an explosion, I would say, of cluster organizations, not the least when it comes to smart specialization and trying to make operations from that strategy. A few words about the Swedish Incubators and Science Parks. I would say we are the infrastructure, maybe the backbone of innovation initiatives. It's kind of reminds me of the digital innovation hubs that you were mentioning, Philipp. But this is a system that has been developed in Sweden for decades. Our members support ideas, entrepreneurs, and also the new and growing knowledge-intense companies in close proximity to academia, I would say, because a lot of the companies are spin-outs from the university, but also from existing businesses, of course. We offer a lot of business counseling and open innovation processes in our member organizations. And we also help coordinate local and regional innovation support actors, like a systemic node, like being an independent arena for different development processes. We have a very tight network on the national level within the SISP organization, and we are also very well connected on an international level. So thank you very much. I hope I didn't take too much time from this session.
Thank you, Lena. I think that was a super great insight and overview of the Swedish innovation ecosystem that is rather complex, maybe from the outside to grasp. Because, and I don't know if you agree with me, Philipp, because in Germany you have the opportunity to gather many of these functions that Lena covered, as you could see, in one that is you. But in Sweden we have all of these different, both from funding agency level onto support level for our innovative SMEs that you heard are one of the most important groups for us to support. So what's your reflections? That was my first question, actually. What do you see? What do you see that we have in common, and what do you see that are very different?
Lena, would you like to start, or shall I start?
You can start. Please, my guest.
First of all, and this is, I think, not big of a surprise. The Swedish ecosystem, in the Swedish startup ecosystem, is much more advanced than the German one, I would say. The Swedish startup ecosystem is one of the world leading ones. I think I've read a statistic recently. I think the Stockholm region comes second after Silicon Valley when it comes to the number of startups. So let's say the point where we start from is very different. Also, and maybe Lena, you can prove me wrong on this. It seems that Sweden has a more centralized approach than Germany. Would you agree on that, or not so much?
I would say both, because I was mentioning about the very essence of us being open, trusting, and maybe more coordinating and consensus driven than managed. I would say the Swedish innovation ecosystem is hard to manage. It's easier to coordinate. Sometimes I think maybe we should maybe need a flavor of some design thinking in order to put it together in a more efficient way. Maybe not as efficient as in Germany, but a little bit more. But I think also the DNA and the culture is that we like to be very consensus driven and act as individual organizations. Something like that. Another reflection is that I mean, Germany have a great internal market of 80 million people. Of course, that drives innovation and business. Sweden is a very small internal market, which also means our startups need to think globally from day one in order to grow their business and scale. So that is quite a different perspective also.
I could imagine that from a startup perspective, this is actually a very positive thing. So if you have to think global from day one, because you know that the local market is limited, this is actually, how can I say it? It's a feature, not a flaw. It's something very positive if you think globally from day one. In Germany, many startups rather think for the global market, for the local market, and then in a second step, they go globally. And I could imagine that thinking globally from the very beginning is very positive.
I think so too. And I was thinking, I didn't mention so much about different activities in the light of the pandemic, but of course we've been doing some things as well. For instance, we have a well-developed support system for startups, as we have been talking about. We are trying to form programs to also support our scale-ups, the scaling companies, to actually scale with their business still being present in Sweden, so to speak. And within those programs, we have tried to actually see what were the needs during the pandemic times. And for instance, made programs around change management and how to lead your operations when the the surrounding world is changing, but also how do you fund your business when not all the VCs are as interested as earlier. We have also did some activities like the ones that you were mentioning. We had the Sweden-Germany collaboration days with Ignite as facilitator, where we connected startups from Industry 4.0 with German corporates, which was a really great initiative. We've also tried to form other kind of programs to connect the startups to the corporates. Like in my region, we did one called Index 2020, where we connected startups with corporates, and the result was 5 funded pre-studies, which were actually really great for the startups in this period of time to have existing customers and existing pre-studies to help them develop their products and solutions further.
Yes, and especially these times, we know that it's very difficult for the startups. We conducted a survey during the spring, and then we could see that especially startups within the fields of clean tech and in the fields of heavy industrial applications such as Industry 4.0. Were really struck badly by the COVID pandemic, and that is also what we are trying to support with in Ignite. Ignite is the national program for connecting startups with potential customers, both within the private and the public sector, and I'm the manager of that. And we have been focusing a lot on these specific sectors now during the fall, because that we can see that these kind of startups, or these startups are really hurt in another way than for example startups as Hopin, as we're using now, are of course experience something totally different. So we see that startups within, for example, online solutions for training, for events, for education, and those kind of things, and also gaming. The gaming industry is thriving, and it's been one of our strongest industries already before the pandemic, and now our gaming companies and community startups within that community are doing really well. So it's a little bit different how the situation strikes for different startups, and we are trying to support where we can do the most difference, of course. We have a lot of questions in the chat, actually, which I think is a fantastic thing, because that's what we wanted to have. I have some more questions as well, but I thought that we could break in with some of the chat questions.
Good idea.
What do you say, Mikaela?
Thank you, Philipp and Lena, for the insights in the ecosystems of innovation in Germany and Sweden. In the chat, I will run from the beginning. We have a first question for Philipp. You told us about the 12 sector-specific hubs that you have organized for a way for meeting big corporates with startups within a specific sector. But how about the exchange between sectors and between the hubs? How do you work with that?
Yeah, I think that was the question of Johan, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Johan, for that question. Actually, when I read it in the chat, I thought I should have maybe elaborated on this a bit more in my presentation, because I really outlined how we do the international part. Two things maybe are there to add. First of all, every hub is run by a team of hub managers, and those hub managers do, let's say, the actual day-to-day work, which means they organize exchange between the companies, the corporates in the hubs, and the startups. They do regular checks, which jobs or which tasks do our corporates have, which solutions do the startups have. So they do, let's say, a matchmaking all the time. Also, every hub has their own accelerator and incubator programs in which the corporates are heavily involved in, and very often, of course, the company, I think I mentioned it in one of my first slides, are in the board of the hub. Second, and this is where RCKT comes into place. So we do regular exchange meetings between the hubs. Of course, it's also always very interesting for one hub how the others are doing, how they are coping, what they have planned. So there's also a continuous exchange between the hubs themselves.
Thank you, Philip. I continue with a question for both of you, I think. We have talked a little about unicorns already today, but the so-called zebra companies that is both for a profit and for a cause, trying to fix a societal problem by at the same time making profit. What would you say that your respective innovation ecosystem are suited for this kind of and supportive of this kind of companies or not? You can start, Lena.
Could you take the question one more time so I understand?
Yes, the so-called zebra companies are both for profits and for a cause, like fixing a societal problem. Would you say that your ecosystem is in supportive of this kind of companies?
Well, I would say we have a way to go there. We have some supporting initiatives. For instance, Linköping University have a social impact incubator, which is a quite early initiative that have been running for 2 or 3 years, I think. But I wouldn't say that the innovation ecosystem as a whole is mature when it comes to zebra companies so far.
Thank you.
I could maybe also add something there that we have an incubator program in Sweden with the SISP Incubators members, of course, but that also is run by Vinnova or funded in majority by Vinnova, our innovation agency, funding agency. And here it's been a huge restructure just the last year. All of the incubators are regional and independent and often owned by for example, Linköping University. So in Linköping, you will find Lena's organization, but also an incubator that is also owned by the university. And they form a very, very vivid innovation center altogether. And I know that Johan Liljekreutz is in the chat as well. That's the
and maybe
CEO
we could also mention
company.
a few initiatives like Sting in Stockholm have started incubation program for doing good, and we also have the UN incubator initiative in Lund. So there, of course, there are great initiatives around the country, and also as you are mentioning, like the universities having more focus on utilization together with commercialization. That is a great start for this to evolve, of course.
Yes. And also in this restructuring of the incubator program that have been done during the last year, the global goals target is a very important KPI. So all the startups that you take in as an incubator for your incubation programs will be also assessed not only by team, by all the scalability business models and such, but also by connected to the global goals and on what goals you are targeting. So I think that we are trying together, all of us, in various different ways, but you also see that our system is very independent. So that's why, and as Lena said, it's more about collaborating and supporting different initiatives and forming different initiatives. We are not a top-down system. We are very much a bottom-up.
And we are actually joined by the government's vision of becoming the first fossil-free welfare state. So that is quite an ambitious vision, I would say, but that also makes us strive to do better and to ignite new initiatives to help support this vision, of course. So, Germany, what's happening?
I would maybe give an example. I think this was a question from Anna. I'm not sure if this company falls under your definition of a zebra, but in the last episode of the startup games, we promoted one startup called I2U, who provide kind of an eye eye problem detection software. The idea is you look into your mobile in the app, and then the camera identifies if you have a cataract, right? So this kind of eye problem, and they do both. They want to use this to, let's say, enter the optician market in Germany and gain money from there. But they also want to roll their software out to countries, maybe sub-Saharan African countries, where there's no opticians, or where you have to travel long distances to go to an optician. So they do both, actually. They want to achieve profitability, but also help solve societal problems. So we do have some of these companies on board.
Thank you, Lena and Philip, for letting us know that. I have a few comments as well that if you want to, you can reflect on, or otherwise I will just say them, and we can get on with the conversation. It's from Johan Liljekreutz that he thinks that we should also mention that within all of those in the Swedish ecosystem, we also have a great impact from the innovation offices and holding companies related to the universities. So, yes. Also, another question or reflection from Anna Douglas is that in Sweden, there is a quite outspoken challenge that we have very short projects and support systems instead of long-term support programs. What is your reflection on that, Lena, and how does that translate to Germany, Philip?
Yeah, it's very, very true what Anna is saying, and also reflects what I was trying to describe with national initiatives that are supposed to be carried out on a local and regional arena. A number of science parks, for instance, are funded by the local government, like the municipalities, and the smart specialization is carried out by the regional governments, and then we have the national initiatives. And maybe we should need kind of a holistic picture of the whole innovation ecosystem in order to design it wisely. And then we have, of course, all the projects, the project funding, which is short-term. And for instance, now we are waiting for the new European program, which is about to be launched next autumn. And of course, this is a very difficult times when it comes to funding and to continue build structures and maintain competence within our organizations. So also I would say the innovation support system need to have some support from our agencies and stakeholders at this time to overbridge the pandemic.
Would you like to make a comment, Philip, on that, or?
Yes, of course. So when I read Anna's comment, I had to smile a bit, because she wrote local, regional and national ecosystems for innovation. Multi-level governance is a challenge for Sweden. And actually it's quite similar in Germany. We have the Digital Hub initiative, but then there are, let's say, similar or complementary initiatives on a regional level. Some cities have their own hubs. I think there are even European programs. I think, Lena, did you just mention that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Then there are European programs. So sometimes it feels a bit like a jungle, and I can see that from an outward perspective, and maybe sometimes even from an inside perspective, it can be a bit confusing. So it's quite similar in Germany.
Mm. I have a question for Philip. Yeah.
Please hit me.
Do I make? Yeah. I was thinking when you were describing that it seems like the innovation ecosystem that you described is more focused on specialization and maybe carried out through the Smart Specialization Initiative. And we have that in Sweden as well. It's mostly carried out by our cluster organizations on different regional levels. But do you have something similar to Science Park and Incubators that operate more broadly and maybe focus more on supporting the startups and the scale-ups and the existing businesses to renew their business models in terms of being more broad, not specialized.
You mean in terms of consultancy, or how do I'm not sure if I really got that.
I wouldn't say that we are consultants in the Swedish. We are in some terms, but we are trying to become market complementary to actual consultants. But I would say, like science parks and incubators, we operate in the intersection between different specialization areas. So we don't have a main focus, maybe like when I looked at your map, it was like smart specialization for the smart society or industrial or automotive or so. I would say it's a bit different from how I think of Sweden.
Oh, I get your point. Thanks. It's, how can I say it? It's a bit of a hybrid situation in terms of our hubs. For instance, if you think of the banking hub in Frankfurt, it's quite easy that it's banking focused. But then there's the AI hub in Karlsruhe, and AI applications are suitable for many industries. So it's kind of, let's say, a horizontal and a vertical approach. And we try to solve this by, let's say, having joint projects between those hubs.
So do you have some organization that facilitates the exchange among those different hubs, or how does that work?
Yeah, they do it themselves, and we try to foster it as good as possible.
But they are also, I'm thinking, Philipp, that they are also a part of your organization. So that's the huge difference, because you are all the same. And we talked about this yesterday when we prepared a little bit. How many employees are you in total, including the hubs that is also employed in your organization?
The hubs are not part of our organization. That's an important difference. So the hubs are their own organization, and this is more of a joint project that we have. So there are different companies. Sometimes they are private, sometimes they are run by the cities, for instance. So we are not the same company. We don't have the, let's say, the power to give them orders to say you collaborate. It's more of, I think what Lena mentioned earlier, is not very directive. It's more of enabling collaboration, or asking them to do something together.
Okay, that makes it clearer. Thank you for clarification. So you're also bottom-up driven, just
very much so.
In the same way that we are. Yeah. But also, I think Lena said that we are non-profit consultants, you can say, in one way, in our system. So most of the science parks and the incubators are owned regionally by different regional owners. That could be sometimes the universities, sometimes the regions, and sometimes the municipalities and so on. So I think that's the difference in some ways. So there are not that many super private companies, I would say, Lena, in our
it's not, but I would also say it's an emerging landscape, and of course we see new initiatives with co-working offices and private incubators and entrepreneurial hubs, of course. So let's see what the future will offer us, and in terms of also organizing and fostering the entire innovation ecosystem today. Like the Swedish Incubators and Science Parks are, as you can hear, science parks and incubators. But I would love to see more collaboration with our national cluster organizations in different regions, because I think there's a lot to be gained by working even more closely together over organizational borders, but also over the regional borders in Sweden.
So, Mikaela, I guess there's a lot of new questions in the chat, right?
The people are on fire. We like that.
We are 65 people in the session at the moment.
That's
so
really
that's
good. There's
awesome.
a couple of questions about the same, within the same field, about how to achieve ecosystem collaboration on an international level, and how to inspire and maybe also push a little on the startups and SMEs to truly achieve global innovation. So you have been touching the subject a little bit, but
yeah, I think there's a lot to be done. For instance, both Philipp and I have mentioned a few initiatives on corporate innovation, which I could think would love to see more on a European level than on a national level. I also think that public procurement, and especially innovation procurement, is really important to drive innovation for the startups and scale-ups in Europe, make it easier, pull down the borders in order for them to help us supply great services for our societies and our welfare. I see a lot of common interest in the access to talent, the access to funding, and would love also to see the digital single market evolve even further, so that regulations make it easier for us to work with the whole European market as a whole, for instance.
And we asked actually ourselves exactly the same question. There are so many different initiatives in the EU, and sometimes you are aware of them because some of them are more active, more prominent. Sometimes you have no clue what a country is doing. So what we did in June this year, we organized kind of an EU-wide roundtable where we invited startup support initiatives from all EU countries just to have a first exchange. Everybody could present themselves, and we hope that this will, let's say, be the spark for a whole series of events. And I have to say, there were more than 20 countries present when we did that.
Wow, great initiative.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we hope to be invited next time, Philipp.
Have a look who was there from Sweden, actually, because I think Sweden was present.
Yeah, probably, but as you know, that our system is a little bit fragmented, so maybe you didn't find us.
yes,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, but I think also just to comment on that, I think what you're saying is important. I think also for our startups, and scale-ups, to see Europe as a market, it's crucial. And also for us to see the European startup landscape as one is also crucial. We need to support our startups and scale-ups to find customers and build their companies in Europe. And that's, I mean, it goes for Sweden, of course. We're 10 million people. We're not many at all. But by connecting in, for example, this national membership organization, Swedish Incubators and Science Parks, then we also build the bridges. So a startup from Umeå can get access to Linköping and all of the good things happening there throughout our very close collaboration and these memberships. But I think we really need to foster that on a European level as well, because what we see in Sweden is that since we are so small and all of our startups are, of course, not looking at Sweden as their main market for the future, they are looking globally. And then we have also seen that European, or for example, the US large companies are very quick in picking up innovations from Swedish startups, which is a good thing, but the consequence on the long term becomes that they get 5 or more customers overseas, and then they eventually move there, of course, and they get their largest investors there, and then they put up their new head offices there and so on, and they're not longer growing here. They're growing other places in the world, which is good for the startup in some sense, but it's not that good for the employee situation of Sweden or Europe. So, but I have been working quite closely with Germany for a couple of years now. First, we brought, and Lena, we also brought more than 30 startups to the Hannover Messe. And there they met these 30 startups within Industry 4.0. They met actually more than 25 German companies, both Mittelstand and larger, like Siemens, which was a really good thing. And at least 3 of the startups have actually, after that, and this was 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, have actually employed in Germany and started offices in Germany. which I think is a really great result. And I'm thinking, how can we foster that more? Because from Sweden, the Swedish startup looks at Germany as the preferred market in Europe, for example. And my understanding is also, from what I learned by talking to all of these German companies, I also understand that you are a little bit better in Germany from a corporate perspective to actually work with startups than the Swedish large companies are. So I think we can learn so much from you on many different levels, actually.
Would you, actually that makes me quite curious. Would you say you have the same problem as I described on my earlier slides, that there's a bit of a reluctance from bigger companies in Sweden to work with startups? Or do they have to be, it's a bit of work to be done until they work with startups?
I would say we started the Ignite program initiative 4 years ago. We started off as a very small pilot. We were targeting 10 commercial collaborations the first year, facilitating Unborn. And we actually reached that target, but then we had less than 1 million Swedish in budget. So, and you know, that's like 10,000 euro for the whole program for the first year. So it was really a pilot. We were really testing. And I would say that the mindset have changed, and the ability and the capacity within the larger companies have really changed during these 4 years. Now the matureness is much better, but I don't think we're still at the level that my impression of the German companies are. My impression, especially for the Mittelstand and the family-owned German companies, is that you've realized that you will not be the expert on digitalization in another way than the Swedish large companies have. Many Swedish large companies still think that they can build up that capacity of themselves. But so that's why it's easier for a German company, Mittelstand company, to actually understand that they need to access the disruptive technologies that the startups has. So it's more of a push relation, and they're actively looking and embracing these technologies. That I wouldn't say that all of the Swedish companies are bad in this, but I still see that the German maybe have a different driver for entering these kind of collaborations. In Sweden, it's more of innovation and finding innovation. It's not that much about the urgency of digitalization, because we are very good at digitalization in an overall level, I would say, in Sweden. So I think you have different drivers.
Well,
is that a good answer to the question?
It's great, thank you.
Should we take one more question from the chat? And yeah, and that one is from Johan Liljekreutz. He asks for, especially Lena, I think, is it possible to work more top-down in innovation? We have talked about our ecosystem, that one of the traits are the bottom-up. And also, is it possible to structure our ecosystem in order to deliver, example, on regarding the first fossil-free welfare state? Can it be done?
I would say top down, no, because I think there are it's a complex landscape of local and regional contexts that lay the foundation of how the different science parks have evolved and the incubators connected to the different universities. So I think the solution to it is the strong vision and, of course, funding programs, as you are mentioning, to drive this acceleration towards a green environment and life science initiatives and other transformative projects. And today, the public sector is actually funding a lot of the green initiatives. And we are welcoming more private funding into this transformation. What is actually a great initiative in Sweden is something that we call the fossil-free roadmaps, where 21 different industry sectors have put together different roadmaps to become fossil-free. This is a great initiative from Sweden, which I know have been recognized in the European Union as a great example to follow. And I think there's a lot to be done when connecting visions with funding. And also, again, mentioning the holistic perspective on local and regional platforms and the investors behind them to go together with the national incentives to create a smarter, I would say, system, not a top-down system, but a smarter system. Yeah.
Philipp, how would you see it in Germany?
Quite similar. I spoke to a representative of let's say, Korean startup system recently, and he said, Philipp, in Korea, everything is top-down. So all the big programs are run by the government, and of course supported and funded by the big companies, but it's all top-down. And I had a bit of a very fruitful discussion with him, and I thought we are exactly the opposite. We believe that that innovation has to come from the industry, from the companies themselves, and the government can do their share in helping and shaping this. But we believe in a bottom-up approach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe we could get back to the questions in the chat at the end of the session. So you keep posting your questions and comments here, and engage in dialogue between you as well.
Okay, then I just lost my question. I have, a cheat sheet in my phone, so I need to find my questions again then. Sorry. I think it was super interesting questions in the chat, and I'm also very happy for you interacting in this way, because this is really what I personally really miss during this COVID pandemic. It's so boring to just be at home and not be able to spontaneously actually meet new people and discuss very interesting topics. So for me, this is like a Christmas Eve. I'm super grateful for all the engagement. Now I'm really not that female, because I'm trying to talk and to look for my questions in the phone at the same time, and it's not working. So excuse me for 1 second.
Then we can take one more chat question in time. It's a follow-up question about the ecosystem. And I think, Philipp, when you said that Sweden were invited to your event, but none of us here was invited, that pokes a big issue or challenge of the Swedish ecosystem being bottom-up and fragmented. But how then, when we have trouble, at least in Sweden, to achieve communication and overhearing between the regional ecosystems, how should we do that without causing information overload on an international level? How should we talk and share knowledge and experience between us without causing information overload?
Would there be a question for me or for Lena?
For both, but you can start, Philipp, if you want to.
I can. That's actually a very hard to answer question, because I have the same experience every day. Because my task is to get our initiative on an international level, right? And there are so many international events and let's say meetings and pitching possibilities and trade fairs. So everything is online now, and everybody thinks their event is the most interesting one, or their solution is the most interesting one. And I need to decide which information I pass to the hubs and to the startups, and which information I can't pass to them. So it's I can only say I have the same issue as discussed in the chat, and the answer is not easy. For me, it's really to think of what is helpful and what is not, to go deep into the matter and then decide which information I can share. Because if I send 5 emails a day to the hubs and to the startups, I think at the end of the week nobody would listen to me anymore.
A challenge I think we all can relate to. Lena?
Yes. Yeah, a really good question, Anna, and I don't have the answer, but I think like coordinating platforms where we can source information to the right target groups is one way of addressing the problem, and maybe having fewer conference initiatives on a national, European, and international level, so that we reach the right target group with the right communication. So I'm not quite sure. It's a really good question. I need to think a little bit more about it. Yeah.
Yes, and I can only agree. And I think our funding structure in Sweden is also something that makes this a little bit tricky, because we have great regional programs funded by, for example, the EU funding, but that also makes it hard for the regional programs that sometimes are, I mean, they are great, and we would love to open them up for all of the startups in the Swedish ecosystem, but we are not allowed due to the funding. And I guess that you have the same problem as well, Philipp, with the programs run by different regions, that the funding is tailored to the startups that are within the region, and you're not allowed to cross borders in an easy way. And I mean, between countries, this is even more tricky. So I would love to open up the Ignite platform, of course. We have that is similar to your B2B matchmaking program that you run, Philipp. But I would love to open up that one, of course, we would, to foreign startups, or at least startups from Europe, but we're not allowed because that's not in our funding. Our funding only allows us to have it open for Swedish startups. So that's also a bit tricky, and that I am a little bit envious of you, Philipp, there, because at least you have the mission to also support foreign startups to enter the German market. So you can do this, but we cannot.
Let's say if I have a German startup tomorrow saying, Philipp, we want to enter Sweden. I know you know Stina. Can you give her a call? And I say, here, there's a company who said this solution. So you couldn't help them.
No, not formally. But if you give me a beer next time we meet in Berlin, then of course. No, but that's really tricky, and that's not only I mean, I run a national program, which is fantastic, and what we do within SISP, the SISP family is national. So here we really can share resources, learnings, and really support our startups. So from for example, Umeå to connect with the right ecosystem regionally. So we can cross-bridge the smart specialization areas. So you can be specialized in AI all over Sweden, but still utilize, the power in the ecosystems that are growing. But that's not often the case. That's a unique case in our case, that we have only some national functions. Most of the programs, the fantastic startup and scale-up programs that we have, are regional and funded regionally. Which also means that you cannot, your funding doesn't allow you to support startups from the outside. So I think that's a major issue that we have in Sweden, but also in Europe. And I know that some countries, they have this function where you are allowed to also support Swedish startups to enter the German market, but a lot of countries doesn't have that. So that would also be interesting, I think, from a design thinking perspective, how to look at the policies and how we can cross them. So that will be one of my favorite topics for the next roundtable discussion.
Well, that's actually a very good thing, because then we already have the first agenda point.
But I also want to promote something that we launched yesterday evening. We have done a major collaboration project with Germany and also France regarding the startups within an AI space. So we actually launched a joint map together last night with more than 550 startups present. And all of these startups, Singapore, one of them are validated, little different validation processes in the different countries. But I think that's a great starting point to give these startups a mutual home, so they also can connect to each other and understand, because startup to startup is also equally important to foster collaboration. That's something that we really see in Sweden. So, but also for you and for companies in all countries to get this fine selection and source startups, even if they are German or French or Swedish.
Mm.
Well, I got a bit distracted by Desiree's quote.
Yeah.
Should we? Sorry, I don't want to. I'm not the moderator here. It's just I find it very interesting, and I think it's worth speaking about. Mikaela, shall I? Yeah.
You can go ahead, Philipp. You can go ahead. Yeah.
So Desiree wrote about diversity and the role that diversity, not only sexual but also racial and religious diversity plays, and that we should, let's say, promote diversity. I think not only in our way of support, but what was it that whether startups need more diverse teams. And maybe I could say something about this, because this is always an issue. I'm not sure how it is in Sweden, but I think I mentioned it in my second or third slide. 4 out of 5 founders in Germany are male and only 1 is female. And this has some challenges to us, because, for instance, when we designed this virtual pitching format, we had the challenge that we had to do 3 things. We wanted to show startups that had good technology, good solutions that would be interesting for the founders. We also wanted to have startups from as many of our hubs as possible, because we wanted, of course, to show the hubs. And third, we wanted the startups to be as diverse as possible. And this means, as I said, diversity in terms of men and women and people of color and all kinds of diversity. And it's not easy always to find this diverse range, let's say, of people, of technologies, and into our terms of our hubs. So we try to promote diversity as good as possible, but it's sometimes really quite a challenge, I have to say.
I would agree with you, Philip, and I think the number in Sweden is even lower than 4 out of 5. And the perspective on this is also, of course, it's a big loss that we don't attract female entrepreneurs and female founders, but it's also, I would say, a democracy problem, since a lot of our startups are technology driven. So it's important when we build the future society that we have equality, inclusiveness, and democracy before our eyes, and if not recruiting female entrepreneurs and, of course, programmers and developers, this will hit hard on our society. So this is a really important question, and maybe also something that we could work together on a European level. I think something that is really important also in the light of the tech war that is going on, mostly between Asia and the US, is the European standpoint, where we actually promote personal integrity, the private perspective, and also secure intellectual property in Europe. And we need to choose the path of our own instead of being forced into this tech war from the East and the West, which I think is really important. And when talking to representatives from both sides, they often mention that Europe will lag behind in innovation pace because we are not sharing data as open as they are. And I think this is a really important question, to have an opinion and a strong value-based leadership in Europe for choosing our path for the future.
I really do like that you introduced the European thought, Lena, because we have exactly the same idea. I mean, everybody knows, or people often say, that Europe is kind of in a sandwich position between, let's say, Silicon Valley on the one side and let's say Far East on the other. And we also have that perspective that we don't. All right.
Sorry.
Oh,
I don't have any energy for my computer.
Okay. So we also have that perspective that we need, let's say, to foster the European integration more. Not only, so our aim is not only to strengthen the German startup ecosystem, which is of course one of our aims, but we think this from a European perspective. So we believe that everything that we do and which European startups do in the long run helps to strengthen Europe's position as a whole.
Yeah, and continuing on your thoughts, I think that looking over different regulations and policies to promote scaling with Europe and the European digital single market as a base is really, really important, so that we don't see as many startups being bought by international investors from East and West. But we want them to stay in Europe and grow in Europe and get the right prerequisites to do that.
Yeah, and if I just can comment a little bit on the equality as well, I think there's also a difference between startups. Some of the really engineer-driven startups, I would say, are very much within, for example, AI. There you can almost only find male funders, unfortunately, still. But if you look into other sectors, such as the clean tech environment sector, we are starting to approach a better, a little bit of a better scenario, but we still have, this is a huge problem in Sweden as well. And I think it's actually larger, as Lena said, than in Germany. And being a very equal society, we don't really understand why this is the case, because we're very proud of everything that allows, for example, women to work. We have the daycare system that is almost for free, and we have so many support systems for allowing women to actually work during the daytime. So that's sad, and we're working on it on many different levels. There's not one single reason, I think. Any more questions from the chat, Mikaela?
One touching the subject from Hussein. He asked how can we do for ensuring that we build diversity into the system and also into the startups. And we have touched upon it during this session, but for example, in Sweden, within the incubators here, there is a lot of initiatives and programs going on how to enlighten and educate, for example, both the startups, but also the business coaches on how to approach these questions about gender equality and a more diversity within every field and every aspects of the business development. Also a good, actually more of a final question from Johan Liljekreutz. There is a lot of good initiatives and findings and ideas in this room, but how do we gather those and how do we take this to the next level? So that is something that we can go back to in the end of this session and hopefully have a good strategy for the next step. Yes.
Thank you. And then I also saw that Jakob Lindvall, who is a dear colleague in SISP as well, asked a question here that I think is really good and we've been touching upon. But what is your opinion about the role for our innovation ecosystems to drive this societal change?
It's a really good question, if I might start. And there are different perspectives. One of them being trying to find the right challenges within the public sector and the welfare sector and take them down to concrete problems that we can match with new solutions from innovative startups and SMEs. and in that way drive societal change, because we foster the arenas where different perspectives can meet, whether it is politicians or lawyers or the civil servants or the users or the technology developers, but to make test facilities. I know in Germany you have something you call the sandboxes, which I think is great initiatives to drive this transformation and societal change. But another perspective on this question is also to drive the discussion about what kind of future society that we want. And when acting on a global arena where a lot of polarization is taking place, I think this is very hard for politicians to drive this as neutral arenas might gather different perspectives and drive this conversation in some way to see what different people see in terms of a future. How will technology actually affect our lives, and how do we want it to affect our lives? I think this is a really important question that I'm missing today, because there is no one who drives this discussion. So that is another perspective. I don't know if that was the answer you wanted, Jacob, but it was one answer anyway.
And Philipp, do you want to comment on that?
I can only say that Lena encapsulated what I would have said anyway. So it's I have exactly the same thought. Yeah, nothing more to add here.
And from our perspective, we've been working with the public sector for 2 years now in Ignite. We have a needs assessment model where we dig down quite deep into the challenges that they have, and that could be challenges, all the way from school and elderly care and home care, all the way to more democratic challenges, how to actually listen to the people living in the regions and so on in a better way. But I can say that we cannot find matching startups for all of those challenges. I would say that there's a 50% where we can find matching startups, but 50% of these challenges are not yet answered by the startup community and entrepreneurs. So I think if we can kind of aggregate this and share it also between the countries on a country level, I think that could be really interesting to be more open, just as Lena says, with these type of challenges and helping to address them or helping to communicate them to the startup ecosystem. Then I hopefully we will see a growth of these kind of startups as well, because then you also know that there's a business pain that you could solve. And I think connecting that to the entrepreneurs would be a good thing. But we have a lot more to do in this aspect. Okay, Mikaela, do we have other questions from the chat? I was kind of worried. I was like, wow, 2 hours dialogue going, but I think that we've done great actually with all the interactivity also from the audience.
Lots of interactivity, and I think we have covered most of the questions by now, so we can go back to the chat one more time at the end, I think, so give them a chance to.
I think we have also covered all of the questions that we had prepared in beforehand, so I think we are pretty, I'm at least very happy with this. What would you say would be your key takeaways, Lena and Philipp, from this 1 hour and 45-minute sessions? If you...
I don't know, key takeaways, I think it's important to stay humble, and there's always a lot to be learned. So thank you very much, Philipp, for great perspectives on these different topics. What I'm considering, and I saw something in the chat also, is the horizontal and vertical views, whereas from my point of view, the horizontal perspective is the science parks and the incubators offering the general processes of business counseling, open innovation processes, inward investment, talent attraction, whilst the smart specialization is the one vertical, which is specified in different sectors, industry sectors, but it could also be competence areas. So trying to build the puzzle to become smarter is something that is one of my key takeaways, I think.
So mine would be, first of all, it was of course very insightful to look left and right and to see what other countries do differently. There's a German word saying betriebsblind, which means kind of blinded by your own everyday work. And it's always very helpful to see how different countries, different initiatives do things differently. And I will speak to my team after the session. And actually, I'm quite excited about today's session. This would be one. My second takeaway is that there seems to be a need for more integration of our initiatives. And Lena, if you don't mind, or all of you basically, we could keep in touch. And when we do the next round of this exchange, or maybe even some bilateral joint projects, this can only help. That would be my key takeaway for today.
Great.
Super. Mikaela,
Yeah,
what do
we
say
have
about the
one
chat?
last question here. I think it's from Johannes. Do you guys think we will see a de-urbanization in the future as digitalization enables working from remote locations more efficiently?
Do you think, oh, sorry, Lena, do you want to start?
Due to the digital way of working that has been grown a lot during the pandemic, do you think there will be a de-urbanization in the future due to this digitalization allowing us to work from remote locations?
I would say yes and no. I know what I think I understand the question. It's a really good question. I think people in a higher level will choose from where they choose to live and then work from that place. One word that has been circulating in Sweden is like place independent. I don't know if you recognize this, Philipp, but everyone keeps talking about it's place independent. You can do it anywhere from remote. But I think when talking about something being place independent, you need to also consider what is the support system around this place. Do we have any service suppliers? Is the teacher to my kid working on remote, or is there actually some kind of concentration of skills from where I'm working? I think this is really important too. So I would say yes and no. I don't think maybe Stockholm will be as attractive as before, or maybe it will. I think other cities that are middle-sized cities will be more attractive, but I don't think we will go all de-urban. I'm not sure, but that's my reflections.
I can only answer this question from a personal perspective. Let's say I'm a Berlin resident. I live in Berlin, and people don't move to Berlin because of the great job chances here. The big industrial powerhouses in Germany are not Berlin. They are in Munich, they are in Frankfurt, they are in Stuttgart, which also are cities. But they're also in the countryside in Germany. I think people move to big cities not only because of job chances, at least well in the case of Berlin, but also because of the social life and the cultural life. And I think this is at least a factor that has to be considered when speaking of de-urbanization. So I'm not too sure about this. I can be wrong. Maybe in when we have the next session on this one, we will all sit in tiny villages. But I wouldn't be too sure about de-urbanization.
Well, thank you for that last answers, and thank you all the participants for making the chat an active and fun place, and a lot of good questions for the speakers. So thank you so much for your participation.
Yes, thank you. And don't forget to be right back in a couple of hours at 2 o'clock set. We are kicking off this year's Ignite Sweden Day, actually, as a part of Sweden Innovation Days. And it will be not this interactive. We will have a lot of interactivity through polls and stuff, but we will have a very, very active program. So it will be a 3-hour ride with a lot of different cases and case studies from large companies, public sector, working together with startups to create a better future with AI, of course. So I think it's well worth coming back in just 2 hours. Watch this. And if it's any startups here in the audience that will actually have B2B meetings tomorrow, we are organizing matchmaking with more than 135 startups and 68 large companies, 435 pre-planned meeting sessions lined up. So you have a sales boost, you have a quick sales training that is really, really helping startups actually nail the business in the meeting afterwards. So I really recommend you to do that. And that's 1 o'clock on the main stage. So we're still going, and now we're like halfway through the Swedish Innovation Days. And I will really lot of thank you to Lena and Philipp. You did a great job, and it's super interesting to talk to. And I really hope that this dialogue will continue now, and we need to tie the ecosystems together, both nationally, but also absolutely internationally on a European level. So I'm really looking forward to the continuation of this.
Thank you, Stina and Mikaela, and thank you for all the interesting questions in the chat room and all the interesting perspectives that you have shared there. Really enlightening. Thank you so much.
Also from my side, it was a great pleasure to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
See you at Ignite.